Hey guys, Chad Trofkerman here from the Incredible Tutorials YouTube channel. Jim Mills and I have teamed up with Smith Micro to bring you these brand new Anime Studio 10 tutorials. So I hope you're ready because we're about to get started. Okay, so for this tutorial, we will be creating a simple animated project in Anime Studio Pro 10. We won't be going as in-depth as we could with many of the tools and features, but this should give you a good overview of how to get started with a project. If you're looking for more in-depth videos on certain tools and features, we certainly have those. Just be sure to check out the official Anime Studio website. So to get started, we have an empty document open, and we're going to go to File, Project Settings, and here we can adjust the dimensions as well as the frame rate. In this case, for this project, we'll be using 720p. Now you could adjust these dimensions for any size you wish, but for this project, we'll go with the 720p HDTV preset, and we'll leave our frame rate at 24. You could change it to 30 or 60 or whatever you want, but for the sake of the project, we'll leave it at 24. And it's always best to change the frame rate early on so that you don't mess with your animation later on if you have things synced up. So now we'll go to Edit, Preferences, and here we'll want to make sure that Consolidate Timeline Channels is not selected. It's off by default, but just make sure that it is off because that will make our lives a lot easier as we get into more in-depth channels as we are animating. So now, just a few other things. Frame 0 is where we will be working in Anime Studio when it comes to drawing, adding bones, and rigging characters. Remember, frame 0 is special in Anime Studio. It's your workspace. And whatever you do here will not be recorded on your main timeline. And as you can see here too, once we go past frame 0, the tools change. You don't have the draw tools, you don't have some of the bone tools you'll see when you're on a bone layer, and so forth. So if you're having an issue with that, make sure you're on frame 0. And finally, this blue border, this is your workspace boundary. Anything outside of the boundary will not be recorded in the final project. So make sure that whatever you have in this boundary, you want on screen. And this can be useful too if you want to bring things on screen later on. You can have them hide out on the sidelines. And you can also zoom into your project by using the zoom tool on your workspace. You can also use the wheel on your mouse if that's easier for you as well. So the first step is to draw up a character for our project. We always start with a layer when making a new document. You can see it's right here for us. It's a vector layer. If we double click, we can rename it. In this case, let's name it Body and then click OK. You can also use the drop-down menu next to the layer to name it as well. So once you have the name down, and it's always important to organize your layers by name, we'll take the Draw Shape tool and then select the oval. We'll leave autofill and auto stroke on and come over here to the style palette. And here we can now choose a color for this particular object. Now all you have to do is click on that white swatch to access your fill colors, and you can go into the color picker and basically pick whatever colors you want. Now you could come down here to your swatches and left click to choose any fill color from here as well. Now, that just depends on how you want to approach it. For us, we'll go into the color picker and we'll choose a green color like this, and then click OK. Now for the stroke, that is the outline of your objects, we can do the same thing here with the color picker. Or if we wanted to, we can come down here to the color swatches and we can right click on any color to select that as our stroke. It just depends on what you want to do when you're working. For the line width, this will dictate the thickness of our outlines. We can put that to 3 for right now. And we can take, of course, the Draw Shape tool and then come on to the canvas, hold down the mouse button, and drag outwards to create an oval that looks similar to this. Now, what we might want to do here when you're doing this is you could take the Transform Points tool and you could adjust points and mesh this and mold it however you want. But we'll leave it as is for right now, but we want some more points to work with other than these 4. So you could take the Add Point tool and come in here and start adding points, but as you can see, it sort of distorts the object. So there is another way we can do this. We can highlight the shape, or all 4 points, come up here to Scripts, Draw, and then Split Curve. What will happen here now is based on the selected points, we can basically split them into how many points we dictate here. So 2 will work for our purposes, and we can click OK, and you can see now 2 more points have been added between each of the selected points. And the object is now not as distorted as it was before when we manually added points. So that can be a real nice thing and save us some time. So now, coming over here, there's also the Line Width tool, and this is something you could do if you wanted to. You can come in here and hold on a point and go from left to right to increase or decrease the size of a line. And for this particular project, or for this part of it at least, we won't be doing that, so we'll just undo those 2 things that we just did, but that option is there if you want it. So now what we can do is select the shape with the Select Shape tool and come over here to the Style palette. There is an Effect drop-down menu, and we can choose Shaded. Now this will allow us to create a shaded effect, and you can see here as we move the angle, we're seeing it reflect on the object itself. We can offset it as much as we want, and we'll probably kick that back a little bit here to about 12. And for the shadow color, we can also choose something that's a little bit lighter. So we can use black, but we can use this dial here to set a transparency so that it's less solid, basically, and it looks lighter. So we have that going on, but now we want another shade for the other side for a highlight. Well, we can click on the Advance button, and then we can now choose a second effect to accompany the first. So let's click on Shaded again, come over here, we'll do an opposite angle of what we did before. We can offset this then to about 12 or 13, and then for the color, we will choose white. Now we may want to go a little bit darker with this as opposed to what we did with the other effect. So we can go right about there and click OK, and we are good to go. So now we can deselect Advance just so we have some more room here to work with. We can now make a new vector layer, and we will name this one Front Arm, or f.arm. Now we can start drawing the arm, or the front arm, for the character. For this, we'll use the Add Point tool. We'll make sure that Auto Weld and Auto Fill are selected, sharp corners turned off, and we can come down here now near the center point of the oval, and we can start now drawing out an arm. So we can just add some points down like so, and start near the top here again, and click and drag to draw a second point, and just come down like this. Just create a simple shape like that, and then connect the points to, of course, meld them to create the shape. Now we don't want those effects, so we'll select the shape, go back into the Advanced here, and just make sure both of the shaded effects are set to plane. And then we can modify here. First, we could take the Transform Points tool and do some modifications if we feel it's needed. But for right now, what we can do is take the Curvature tool, hit Enter to deselect all your points, and then we can come in here and just tighten these curves up just by holding down and going left or right. In this case, we're sharpening the curves when we do it that way, and you can also round them out if you want. But with the Transform Points tool, we can come in here and just move things around just to set it so that we got it just how we want it. And again, a lot of this is trial and error, and you'll probably be spending a lot of time doing little things like this as you work in Anime Studio. But we'll get it just right, so it's good to go. It's always best to get it right the first time, that way you don't have to go in and correct later on. This line right here that divides the body from the arm, we can take the Hide Edge tool, and we can click on that line just to hide it. It's not deleted, it's just hidden, which allows for a more seamless transition from body to arm. Now, let's create a hand. So we'll take the Add Point tool, and we'll come down here and just click and drag out and create just a little alien hand, just with like 3 fingers. So we can just add points here and drag out with other points and kind of get something like that. And then take the curvature tool and come in here, and now we can modify and tighten up and round out to get the fingers how we want them. And again, we're creating kind of an alien looking character here, so we don't need to create a really realistic hand. 3 fingers will work for now. But if you want to experiment with that, you can definitely create more if you wanted to. So we'll just kind of modify the points to get it how we want it, just like that. And I would say here, so far, so good. So now the next step is to create the second arm. In this case, we could duplicate this front arm layer just by hitting that button. And we can rename this new layer then to back arm or B period arm. And now you won't see it because it's overlapping the original layer. But what we could do is come over here to the Transform Layer tool, and we can move it. You can see now we have 2 of the same arm, and we can even rotate it. Now you'll notice as we rotate, it's being dictated by what is called the origin point, which is right here. Now, if you want more control over this, you can set the origin point so it's on top of the arm, which will make things easier. So we can take the origin point tool, just click on the top of the arm, and then we can come in here and rotate again, and notice how now it anchors to the top portion of the arm, which can make things a lot easier to work with and even to animate later on, should we choose to use the Transform Layer tool to animate. So now we can bring that in, and we can now set it just how we want it. We'll want the back arm below the body though. So we can set the back arm below the body so that it appears behind the body on the canvas. So now we will want to draw out some legs. So what we can do here is we can come up here to the new layer and choose vector. We'll name this one front leg, f.leg, if you want to shorten it. And grabbing the Add Point tool, we'll come in here and just start drawing out a simple leg. Again, just like the arm, you'll probably have to feel this out to get it how you want it, but we can just lay some points down and just sort of mold it out. And the good thing is we can then take the curvature tool to perfect it. So just come up like this, in like that. Now, with the curvature tool, we can hit enter to deselect our points. Oops, we hit delete. If you ever do something you don't want to do, simply use Command Z if you're on Mac or Control Z if you're on PC. That will allow you to undo. You can also go up to Edit Undo if you ever need to correct a mistake. And you can do that a few times if you need to. So anyway, we're just coming in here now with the curvature tool, and we are tightening things up and just getting the curves how we want them so that they reflect more here of how the foot should look like. So now we'll move the front leg above the body layer so that it's in front, and we can also hide that line like we did with the arm so that it looks a little bit more seamless here going from body to leg. Now we can duplicate this leg once we're satisfied with it, and we can rename this one B leg or B.leg. Move it away from the original layer here. And you can hold and shift while you are translating layers to keep them on one plane. So in this case, as you can see, we're keeping it right on the x-axis. It's just moving horizontally. We don't have to worry about any of the vertical properties when holding in shift. And we can move the back leg, of course, below the body now as well. So now, there might be a few more things we want to do here. So let's take the Transform Points tool, come in here, and we can move these points up a bit. And you'll see why we're doing this later on. But we'll just do it right now. And we'll make sure we click on this other layer here. We can just come in and move up like so. Also, if you want to, you can hold down Alt and right-click on other vector shapes in other layers to select them. So now, what we can do is, let's see here, we'll create some hair. So we'll make a new vector, name it hair, and we can then come over here to the style palette, and we will make some yellow hair for our character. So a yellow fill, just like that. And then a darker yellow for the stroke. And we can also decrease the width of this line. Well, let's see what happens first. So we'll come in here and we'll start drawing some points up like so, just to create a little puff of hair. We can kind of come down and up like this. And of course, you can do any type of hairstyle you want. For our alien, though, this should suffice. So let's come in here and kind of draw things out like that. Connect the points like so. We can come in here now with the curvature tool. Sharpen these points. And we can do some other things here. Maybe sharpen those areas. And we could even round some things out if we wanted to. It's kind of like that. Maybe a little bit right here. So, once you have gotten your hair how you want it, we'll want to make sure the hair is below the body. In fact, let's just put it below everything. And then we can select it. Let's add a shaded effect to it. So, selecting it with the Select Shape tool and clicking the Effect, and of course, Shaded. We can just set the angle to about 174, reduce the offset here to about 5. And, you know, it's something you just kind of have to play with here. We could actually maybe adjust the angle a little bit. And we may even reduce the shadow here, the opacity, and click OK. And that looks pretty good. And again, you'll probably have to play around with it. And we'll do the same now for the other side, like we did before with the highlight. So we will adjust the angle, reduce the offset, and we can just kind of select a white color, and we can even bump this up a bit if we want. Click OK. And depends, we can probably increase that offset. And things now are looking pretty good, and we can reduce that line width like I mentioned before. So far, so good. Here is the body now for our character. Okay, so now let's focus on creating some eyes and a mouth for this character. First, we will need to make a new vector layer for the eyes. So we can click on that top layer, go up to vector. This will allow us to make the vector layer on top of everything else. And then we can just name it eyes. And then hit enter. So now we'll take the Draw Shape tool, an oval, and for the fill color here, we can choose white. For the stroke, we will choose gray, just by right-clicking on the swatch right there. Now for the width of the eyes, we can adjust this so that it looks to be around 2. Now, taking that Draw Shape tool, we can come in here and we can start. Holding in Shift and clicking and dragging allows us to create a perfect shape, in this case a circle. Now you'll notice we still have the shaded effects still applied to this object. So we can take the Select Shape tool, click on that object, come over here to Advanced, and then we can just remove those effects from the object. Now, with the Transform Points tool, you can move the eye around. You could also rotate. In this case, it wouldn't make much sense since it's a circle, but you can see you can also resize as well using the 9 control points on the first outline. So now, let's reduce this to about right there, and we can move this around to where we see fit. Now, we can use Control C and then Control V to copy and paste, or Command C and Command V if you're on a Mac, and bring this second eye over just like that. So now we have 2 eyes. Next, we're going to need some pupils. So make a new vector layer, and we can name this one Pupils. And then come over here to the Draw Shape tool, making sure it's still an oval. We will select black for the fill. And we can come in here now with the oval tool, hold in Shift to create a perfect circle. Taking the Select Shape tool, we can remove that stroke if you accidentally had it on. And then with the Transform Points tool, we can select, copy, and paste, and move over to the other eye. So we should now be good to go with that second pupil. So what we can also do is use the Draw Shape tool with an oval, and we're going to come over here, make sure that second pupil is deselected before you do this. We are going to choose a white color and then come in here and draw out a small white circle and then remove the stroke. The Transform Points tool will allow us to move it inside the pupil like so, and we can even resize it a little bit. And then we will simply copy and paste and move it over to the second pupil just like that. So now you have a reflection going on with the pupils, which just adds a little bit more to it. So now we want to add some eyelids to this character. So we can make a group layer first, because we want to set up this mask before we go into the eyelids. And a mask, I know that sounds scary, but trust me, it will be pretty easy, and I think you'll see it looks pretty cool once we finish up here. So we'll name this one Eyes. And what we can do then is move the pupils and the eyes into the eyes group layer. Now, once you do that, we can enable masking first, and then we can concentrate on the eyelids. So to enable masking, double-click on the eyes group layer. We'll come over here to the masking tab on the top and click Hide All. Now, once you do this, you can come down and hit Apply. You'll see on your Layers panel that some things have happened with the icons. Things have a different look to them, indicating that they are being masked. So we can click OK, and nothing seems to have changed right now until we come over here, we select the points for the pupils and use the Transform Points tool, and we start to move the pupils outside of the whites of the eyes. You'll notice that we can't do it. That's kind of the boundary there. And that will help us now when it comes to pupil movement. Now, it might not be so noticeable in this tutorial, but you'll see here in a moment that it really works for the eyelids. So, speaking of the eyelids, let's focus in on that next. What we can do is, within this masking group layer, is we will create a new vector layer. And we can name this then Eyelids. So once you have the name, what we'll do is come over here to the Draw Shape tool, select a rectangle shape, and starting right about here, let's see here. Yeah, we will we want to make sure first that we have the same color. So if you use the eyedropper tool, that'll transfer the colors of the body over to your shape. So now we can just concentrate on drawing out this rectangle using the same colors. Now the shaded effect will be applied as well, and we can leave that for right now, but we may adjust it here in a little bit. So you have that. Now let's draw another rectangle for the second portion. You'll notice now it's designed so that the masking is putting it around the eyes. However, we are losing the stroke, and that might not be desirable. So what we can do for that is we can double click on the eyes vector layer, go into masking, and choose exclude strokes and hit apply. Hit OK, and now your strokes are back. So that's how you can, of course, do that. Now we can come in here and we could probably take a look here at these eyelid shadings. So we can just click on the top eyelid, and we can then go over here to make sure we're on the eyelids layer when we do that. We can then come over here then to the style palette, and we will then choose to offset this less than we are. And that's looking pretty good. We'll just do something with this one here really quick then. Maybe about like that. Click OK. So that's looking pretty good now. And it looks like our eyes may be set up and good to go. So now what we could do, we can just hide that masking layer for right now and create a new vector layer. Let's start with the mouth. So we'll name this one mouth, and then we can come over here then to our tools, select the add point tool, make sure auto weld and autofill are selected, and we'll just create a mouth under the eyes. So we can just kind of come up like this. It'll be an open mouth, little dip, and then we can release. Now, of course, we have that shaded effect and the green color still there. We can just click the select shape tool and click on the mouth. And typically when people draw mouths, they use a black fill color. So we can do something like that if you wish. You can play around with it if you want, but we'll turn the shaded effects off so that we don't have that going on. As far as the stroke, we can leave the stroke as is for right now. I believe that will work. So we can do that, and we can use the curvature tool here to tighten things up, just again to give it a nice sharp effect here for some of the corners of the mouth. Maybe round off some other points like that, and just kind of play around with it just to get things where we want it in terms of the shape of the mouth. And of course, if you're following along and making your own character, you may be making a different mouth entirely. Now we're adding some points here just so we have some leeway later on if we choose to animate or adjust. It's always good to have just a couple extra points there in that event. So once you have shaped your mouth the way you want it, we can come over here, make a new vector, and now we're going to name this one inside. This will be all the inside assets for the mouth. So we can come up here to the fill color, choose white, click OK. For the stroke, we can do a light gray, hit OK. And we'll take the create shape tool, rectangle, and we will draw a rectangle like so, kind of like how you did with the eyelids, just straight across, top and bottom. Now this might seem weird right now because why are we drawing it like this? Well, you will see soon enough here. We'll add some points on the top and bottom of the rectangle, just so that we have, again, some leeway when it comes to designing if we need it. And we will now draw a tongue. So right around here, we'll draw out an oval. Take the select shape tool. We will use a pale red for that, and then a darker stroke just to give it a good outline. And then we can come in here and make some adjustments if we need to. Maybe squish it down a bit like that, and over like so. And now, what we'll do is create a group. We can name it mouth. Then we place inside and mouth, the vector layer, into the mouth group. Then we can double click on mouth, choose masking, choose hide all, click OK. Now you can see here things are coming together. Now for the inside, let's click on the tongue, hold in Shift, and then hit the down key. This will then bring it one step below the vectors you have on your layer. And we can do the same with the teeth, except hit the up key, just to make sure that everything is situated the way it should be. And you can test this out by moving your teeth up and down. You can see that everything is above where it should be for the teeth, and the tongue is in the position that it needs to be. Now we'll need to double click on mouth, of course, go into masking, and then exclude strokes. Click OK. So now we have the lines for the mouth. So now, with that made, we can come in here and make any adjustments. Like with the teeth, we could just move some things around, because we can now see more what this looks like. And just kind of move the tongue around, make sure everything is situated where we want it to be. And we could even adjust the teeth a little bit here too, like with that middle point that we made. We can kind of bow the teeth down a little bit, like so. Kind of just get everything situated like that. Curvature tool also works because that allows us to really easily tighten things up. So it'll be just a matter of playing around, and really that's what a lot of it comes down to, is just playing with it, visualizing, seeing what's going on, and making the necessary adjustments as you continue to work. So now, the next step here is some eyebrows. We have yet to make eyebrows. So we'll make a vector layer, and we can name this eyebrows. Come over here to the Draw Shape tool, select the rectangle, autofill and auto stroker on, and we can come down here. Let's select a dark gray for the fill. Draw it out like this. And we can correct the stroke as well here. Select that shape and just remove the stroke. And we can come in here now and just kind of move some points around to mold the eyebrow. Kind of like that. We can even add some points like this to help us mold it. Kind of bring that up. Just kind of go over like that. And just, shape an eyebrow how you would like to see the eyebrow on your character. Now we can use the copy and paste method with the eyebrows as well. We can click flip horizontally for this one at the top, and then bring the eyebrow over like so. And we can even shrink it slightly since it is a little bit more away from the camera. And so now we have the eyebrows in place, which is pretty good. Now you'll want to make sure that your arm, the foreground arm, is above everything else, because as an example, let's just set the origin point here to the top of the arm. If we were to rotate this arm up, you can see that the facial features get in the way, and we want to make sure that those are not in the way. So we can just bring that arm above everything else so it's set and good to go. So now we will want to rig up our character with bones. The first step to this will be to create a bone layer. So on your layers panel, hit new layer, choose bone, and you can name this whatever you want. In our case, we'll name it monster, since that's kind of what he is. Hit enter, and now you'll want to take all of the layers that you made for this character and bring them into the monster bone layer. So click on the top one, hold in shift, click on the bottom one, and then click and drag until the bone layer turns red and release. All of your layers are now in the monster bone layer. So now what you'll want to do next here is start drawing some bones. So we can come over here to your bone section here and grab the Add Bone tool, or A as a shortcut. Now, your first step will be to create an anchor or main bone for the character. So you can do this in a couple of different ways. In this case, we will keep it simple. We'll simply start near the bottom here and then just click and drag and draw upwards to create that bone. So once you've done that, you can release, and we can then continue to draw upwards. So we'll do a torso bone right here, and we can release once we have it positioned. We'll do an upper torso or head bone in this case, and from here now we'll want to draw some bones for the front arms. So we can come down like this, about there, and release. Draw one for this part of the arm and then for the hand. Actually, let's just redo that really quick and draw this one right here and that one right there. I think that'll look a little bit better. So what we have going on here is called a hierarchy of bones. So far, we have everything connected where it needs to be. Let's hide the body and eyes here really quick just so we can see what's going on. Now, if we were just to continue on right now drawing these bones and we click the Reparent Bone tool, you can see, for instance, the foreground hand is connected to the background arm. And that doesn't make much sense. If we tried to move this stuff around, it's not going to work. Right now, of course, with the bone strength, it's not going to work anyway. But trust me, you're going to want a definitive hierarchy here. So, for instance, you're going to want this arm to be connected to the torso, just by highlighting that bone, clicking Reparent, and then clicking on that torso. If you want to unlink a bone, you can simply click off with the Reparent Bone tool, and that will unlink it. But let's just start over here and select that torso bone, and then click the Add Bone tool, and then resume. That's how you would typically do this. Just select the bone you want it to link to and then resume. As you can see, as we continue to draw these bones, we're basically going from one to the other because the one that's highlighted red means that's the one that will be the main bone when you draw the next bone. So for the legs, we're going to want that main bone highlighted, and you can Alt-click when you're using the Add Bone tool to select bones if you want, and we can just continue to come in here and draw out our bones here for the legs and the feet. Make sure we Alt-click on the main bone, and then come in here and draw 3 more bones for the front leg. Just like that. Okay, so now looking at this, let's bring everything back here. It's looking pretty good. However, this foot should probably be down a little bit since it is in the front. So what we could do really quick is just take that front leg layer, and we can highlight all the points that make up the foot, take the Transform Points tool, and just bring it down a little bit. And that's all you really have to do. And you might have to make some minor corrections like this as we continue to advance. Now, as far as that bone that we made then, we may want to redraw it for the foot really quick just so it's a little bit lower. So we can click on that bone and hit the delete key. That will allow you to remove a bone. And then we can click on that leg bone, choose the Add Bone tool, and just draw it a little bit lower now. And then that should work out pretty good now for what we want to do. Okay, so now, as you can see with the Reparent Bone tool, everything is connected where it needs to be connected. Everything is looking good. You can always use that tool just to double check to make sure that you didn't miss something. We can now take the Manipulate Bones tool, and using the bone strings, this is what we're going to be using here initially. If we move these bones around using the bone strings, you can see right away that we are not getting the results that we want. It's really distorted, things are grabbing onto other things, and it's just not really working. So what we can do is what's called flexi binding for the limbs. And you can see here, even if we use the bone strength tool and reduce all of these strengths, you can go to the bone strength tool, click and hold left to reduce the strengths, and you can select all the bones with Control A to move them all. You can see still that it's not even working there. So we will need to use flexi binding, which was introduced in version 9.5 of Anime Studio, and it can make this type of bone animation really easy to do. So first, what we'll need to do is come over here to the front arm vector layer, make sure that that is the layer we're on, hold and shift and click all 3 bones for that arm. Go to Bone and use selected bones for flexi binding, or Control Shift F, Command Shift F if you're on a Mac. We'll do that for the front arm and then for the front leg as well. So let's come in here and select those bones and then use flexi binding. Now you'll notice here that we might have an issue, because as Jim is going in here and selecting these bones, you'll notice that he's actually still selecting the other bones as he's doing this. And you'll see here in a moment why that is a problem and how we can correct it. But just go through and select all the bones for your limbs, and then take your Manipulate Bones tool, and you'll see here initially it works good for the limbs. Of course the body's still going to have some issues here. But when we come down here, you'll notice that the foot is having an issue because we had some of the bones still selected when we shouldn't have had them selected when we were doing the flexi binding for the back leg. And so in order to correct that, what you should do here is come over here to the layer that's giving you the issue. In this case, we'll be selecting here the back leg vector layer here in a moment. Yeah, it'll be the back vector leg. So we'll just click on those bones and make sure that we choose here the back vector layer there, and then go up to bone and then use flexi bone binding. So now you can see it works and we are looking good and things are now better, at least for the limbs. We're going to have to do some correcting now for the torso and other parts of the character. So we will click on the body layer and we will select the main bone. Take the Bind Points tool, which is located right here. It's also I as a shortcut, and you can highlight all of the points and then click Bind Points at the top. Now click on the torso bone, or the bottom torso bone. Select all the points within that area. Say about like that, and click Bind Points. And then use your top or head bone here. Come in here and bind points. Now when we move, you can see things look a little bit better when it comes to the movement of the body. Of course, we still have some issue here with the eyes and the mouth, and we will have to make those corrections here. And there's a couple ways we could approach it. So first, you could just click on the group layer and you could use what's called layer binding. You could just click that layer bind tool and click on the top head bone for each of these, and it would actually work. Because now, if we try this out, you can see that it moves. The problem with this is, if you plan to use smart bones, which we do, smart bones will not work then if you have a group layer bound to a bone. So what you will need to do actually is click on these. First of all, we need to actually get them deselected from the bones. So you can just click off on the canvas with that bone highlighted on those layers just to deselect them. Now we can go inside each of these layers with the vectors and then bind the individual layers to that top bone. This will then now allow us to use smart bones later on, but at the same time use the layer binding so that we can get rid of that distortion that was occurring with the bone strengths. So we'll do that for every single sublayer of those two group layers. So now we move this around. It's looking good. Of course, we still have the hair and the eyebrows to deal with, but the mouth and eyes are now set. So with the eyebrows and the hair, we're going to have to do a couple of different things here. So first, what I think we will do here is we'll click on the monster bone layer and we will select the top bone, and then we're going to add some bones for the eyebrows. So with the right eyebrow, we'll just click and drag like that. Alt click on the main bone and then drag to the edge like that with your left eyebrow. Now, with the eyebrow layer selected, we'll take the bind points tool, and we want that bone highlighted, so we can just bind points to that bone. Select the second bone, click bind points, select the second eyebrow, and then bind the points. So now, if we move these eyebrows up and down, you can see that we can have control over them, and now they won't be affected by the bone strings anymore either, or anything else that we have going on with this character. Now for the hair, we can do some stuff with the hair, but we will return to that at a later time here. We will get to it. We're just going to focus in on some other things as well for right now. So one more thing we can do involves the pupils, and this just might make things a little bit easier. We can select that top bone layer once again, and we are on the monster bone layer in the layers panel. We're going to add a bone just on the outside. I'm just going to draw it out like this. Okay. So now once you have that, you can come in here to your eyes, and we're going to go then to the pupils layer, just like that. And then what you can do is, with that bone selected, we can make sure, of course, that we are selecting here some points then for the eyes here. So we're just going to unbind the eyes from that main bone, select the new bone, and then bind them to this new bone. We could have them on the main bone like we did, or the main torso bone, but now if we take the bone layer here and we go here to the transform bone tool and we translate this bone or move it around, you can see now we can easily control the pupils. So this just gives us a little bit more control when it comes to using the bones, and just one more little thing that you can do. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward here. Now, just a couple of other notes. When you are working on frame 0, and I think I made mention of this before, but when you're working on frame 0, you are free to do all these things without recording. So you can move limbs around, you can test things out, you can move the pupils around, you can do whatever. And it all resets once you select a tool, or if you go to, let's say, frame 1 and page back to frame 0. It'll all reset. Because again, frame 0 is your workspace and nothing is being recorded. This is just where we draw, we can rig, and so forth. So again, just a reminder of that. Now, one more thing to point out as well, when it comes to working with bones, you can see sometimes that the bones might mesh together, and it might be hard to figure out, how to get to a bone, or maybe you're having a hard time clicking on a certain bone. If that's the case, select a bone and choose Hide Selected Bone. That will hide the bone then, so that you can work on the bone that you're trying to get access to. You can do this for multiple bones if you want, and you can always go back to Show All Bones to reveal all the bones again. Okay, so now that we have the character rigged up and ready to go, There are some things we can look at here that we can correct with smart bones. You can see, for instance, when we bend the arm and the hand, we have a little bit of distortion going on there. And this is a perfect case for smart bones. And smart bones basically allow us to create corrections in bone movement that will automatically then be corrected by Anime Studio as we move the bones. So as an example with the head bone here, as we move the torso, you can see here that we have a distortion right there and a little bit right there. So we could easily correct this stuff with smart bones. So the first thing you will need to do is select the bone that you want to affect and come up here with your select bone tool and name the bone. In this case, we can name it head. Now, the reason why we do this is because we need to name the action in the actions panel the same name as the bone in order to create a smart bone action. So go to Window, choose Actions. This will bring up the Actions panel. And now we can create that action using the same name. Now, when you go to do this, clicking New Action, keep in mind you should be on the monster bone layer. We need to be on the bone layer in order to create this smart bone action. So once you have verified that, make sure the name is the exact same as the bone you want to affect. In this case, head with a capital H. Click OK. You'll know it worked when the bone is highlighted in deep red and you have an arrow next to the head action on the actions panel and your timeline is blue. So now we can take the transform bone tool and rotate the character so that we can set the position where we need to make the correction. So right here we'll start with, and this is only on frame 1, we'll alt click or alt right click on the vector layer so that we have the body selected, or you can just choose it from your layers panel. And we can come in here now with the transform points tool and just move these points around to correct the bend. We want a slight arch, but not to the extreme that we had it before. And we can also adjust some points here near the bottom and then double click on main line to go back to your main timeline. Now, if you move that bone layer on frame 0, you can see now that the action has been corrected. Now we can do the same here for the movement when he bends forward. So click on the monster bone layer, create a new action. We'll name this action head 2 and then click OK. Now we can come back over here, rotate the bone, come over here to your body layer by alt right clicking, coming in here, and we can move that point then forward. And you can do any other adjustments that you need to. Going back to the main line, manipulate bones, we can see here what's going on, and it looks a little bit better, although we could still do some corrections here. So let's go back into that first action, and with the body layer selected, we can just come in here and adjust these points a little bit more. That's the good thing about an action. You can always go back into it and adjust it if needed. So now on the main line, we can see now that this is looking better. And what we can do now is look at one of these arms here. So we'll take the manipulate bones tool. You can see again that the bend is just kind of caving in. And so click on that bone layer, select the bone that's causing the issue, name the bone. In this case, we can name it front forearm or F.FA just to shorten it up. Go to your layers or actions panel. Make sure here that you name the action the same as the bone. Come in here, rotate the bone to the most extreme point where it's giving you an issue. Then you'll want to select the arm. Alt right click will work. And then we can come in here and adjust these points. It's kind of hard to see that point, but it's right there. We can just move it up. And we can use the curvature tool as well, just to kind of tighten things up like that. And so now, we can move that out. maybe a little bit more like so. Okay, things are looking better. We can then go back to the main line by double-clicking on it. Take the Manipulate Bones tool and take a look. And it's looking a little bit better. We could probably still do a couple more adjustments. So let's go back into that action. And we can come in here and just adjust the points a little bit more. Go back to main line. Take your Manipulate Bone tool and try it out one more time. Now you could apply this to the other arm. You can see the difference there. You can apply it to the legs and so forth, but we'll leave that up to you. For the sake of time, we will now move on to the next step of the step-by-step tutorial. So as I mentioned before, we were going to come back to the hair. And so now, let's take a look at it. So the hair isn't bound to anything right now, and if we move some limbs around, like for instance the eyebrows that have influence on them, you can see that the hair is being affected. And, well, we want to change that, but not only that, we want to add a little bit of bounce to the hair. So we'll select the monster bone layer and click on that head bone, and then come up here to the Add Bone tool. And we're going to add some bones to the hair. So starting near the bottom here, we can just start to create some bones for the first, I guess, blade, if you want to call it, of hair or strand of hair. And we'll do 3 bones, just like that. Now Alt-click on the head bone again and do the same for the second strand. Come in like that. Get those bones in. Alt-click and do the same for the third strand. So now we have bones for the hair. So what's this going to do for us exactly? Well, let's come down here to the hair layer, and what we can do here now is come over here, select the top bone, click Bind Points, and highlight that tip point and bind it. Do the same for the second strand. Click the tip, bind, select the third top bone, click the tip, and bind. I almost said blind. So now we come in here with the second bone on the list and come down here and click those 2 points to bind them. Same with the second strand of hair and the third. Just go up and hit Bind Points. Okay, so now what we can do from here is you can, if you need to, you'll see that we have some points here that aren't quite lining up with the bone, or at least the edges of the bones. So we can kind of come in here and just tweak that slightly if, again, you need to. It looks pretty good actually for us, but we can just make those minor adjustments. It'll just look better in the end. So now, with that bone layer selected, we can highlight all of those top bones, all 6 of those bones, click on Bone Constraints, come down here, check on Bone Dynamics, and hit Close. We can leave the default settings for right now. Now, you're not going to be able to see any of this in effect unless we have some animation. So let's just create a quick animation. What we can do is come down here to the timeline, and we are just going to do a quick, I would say, bend, just to get some idea here of how the dynamic bones are going to affect. So we can go to frame 24, click the Manipulate Bones tool, click on the head bone just to create a keyframe. Again, just for a test. We'll go to about frame 36, and we can bend forward slightly. Then go to about frame 42, and don't worry about that bouncing you saw. It's not part of what we'll be seeing here. Click to create a keyframe, and then you can move the character back like so, just to get some movement. Now if we hit play, we can see what this looks like. It's just a nice little spring effect. That's what Dynamic Bones does for us. It allows us to just have this, basically this physics-based movement applied to whatever you apply it to. So what we can do now is we can select those bones again and come up here, and we could adjust any of these settings to create a different movement for the bones. And a lot of this will be trial and error. It's just going to have to be something you play with to see what you want. So for instance, if we put the torque to 2.5 and play it, you can see we have a slightly different thing going on, and it looks a little bit better, actually, I would say. So you can easily change this at any time, and you can animate them out too. So you could have bone physics placed in, and then you could take them out, and then you could put them back in. That all animates on the timeline. It's just like turning a transparency effect on or off on a layer. So now, what we can do here is if we take the Manipulate Bones tool and move the eyebrow, you'll notice that the hair is still slightly affected. That's because first we have some influence on these eyebrow bones that we really don't need. So we could just get rid of that. But more importantly, we didn't actually bind the bottom pieces of the hair to anything, so we can go ahead and do that as well. So what we can do here first is, actually, let's just highlight, let's see here. Yeah, let's come back here to the bone layer. Let's highlight all those bones and go to the bone strength and just remove the strength of them because we don't really need that, and it's a little bit distracting when we're not using it. You can see it still works because we haven't bound to points. So once you have that set, go to your hair layer, and we will just select those bottom bones, click Bind Points, and then highlight all the points for the hair, go up and hit Bind Points. So now it's all bound, and you don't have to worry about the hair being affected by anything from here on out. Now we're going to create what are called smart dials. These act as controls which we program to do different things. And you can see they are similar to smart bones. So first, what we'll do is we will select the monster bone layer and click on the head bone. We are going to link this dial to the head bone, just so in the event that if the character moves, our dials will move with them, so we don't lose the dials at some point. So we'll draw out a bone like that, and then go to Bone, Make Smart Bone Dial. So make sure that that bone is highlighted when you do this. We can then name the dial. We'll name it, let's see here. I think we're going to control the eyes first. So we'll do eyes, and we can leave everything else as is, and then click OK. So now you have a dial and an action already made for you. Pretty cool, huh? This is new to Anime Studio Pro 10. So from here, you can see in our timeline we have a duration of 100 frames. So this is helpful because we can come in here and create some animation and just go within these 100 frames, and then the dial, when we use it in our main timeline, will then control whatever we plan to control here. So we're going to go to frame 1, and then zoom in here, and we can Alt and right click on the eyelids. Or you can go to your layer panel and select the eyelids that way if you wish. So we'll take the Transform Points tool here, and holding in Shift, we're just going to move these down so that the bottom line is near the center. We're going to do the same thing here for the bottom. We're just going to move these up so that it meets the center line like so. And then for the top lid, we can just move the points upward to cover the eyes. So now we have a close position. Let's go all the way now to frame 100 because that's where we set this lifetime frame. And if we go to the bone layer, you can see the dial is set to 100, so we can have the eyelids go to 100 as well. And now on frame 100, take the Transform Points tool, hold in Shift, and we're going to lift this all the way up, even so that it goes past the eyes themselves. We'll do the same for the bottom layer. Now, going back here to the main line, if we come down here, take the Manipulate Bones tool, and move this dial to the left, they close, to the right, they open. So you're going to frame 0 to frame 100 within that dial, within that action, and you can control it now with the eyes. And we basically just created a pretty neat effect with just one bone. So now we need to create a second bone for the mouth to do something similar. So what we can do is click on the monster bone, select the head bone, and then we can just kind of zoom in here, take the add bone tool, and we can draw a second bone now, maybe below the eyes, just kind of near it. And then bone, make smart bone dial. From here, we can name this mouth, and then click OK. So now we have the same situation. This bone goes to 100 frames. We'll start at frame 1. We will alt-click on the mouth details here. And if you're having an issue, we could actually click on the mouth itself. That's what we're trying to get at. So just go into the layers panel and click on the mouth if you can't do the alt right-click method. So now on frame 1, we'll move our points. We'll move the top points down just slightly, because in reality, the top portion of the mouth won't move just with the jaw. But with animation purposes here, we can move it slightly. And we'll just come down here and just kind of move these points so that they connect as close as possible to make it appear that the mouth is closed. So come up like that and down like so. So you have your points pretty much connected here. You could even take the line width tool and taper some things off here if you wanted to. That is always an option, but that is completely up to you. So now move to frame 100. Now, when we are on frame 100 here, to make a shortcut, we could actually copy the frames from frame 0 with Control-C, then Control-V, or Command-C and Command-V, and that will give us a starting point then. So then we can come in here with the Transform Points tool, and then we could make the mouth even wider. So we can come in here and just expand things upward, just to give it more movement. Come in here and just make some adjustments. Kind of like this. And then you can see here, as we page forward, we have an opening animation. Now, we can do some adjustments here with the teeth and the tongue if needed. So we can come in here on frame 1 and move the bottom teeth up slightly. And we can just nudge the upper teeth. And when we go up like this, we can then either copy frame 0. You could copy frame 0, or you could just move it yourself. We actually kind of had a little bit of trouble grabbing those frames. Sometimes you have that issue when you have a bunch of frames together, but we're good. We can just manually move those teeth down, nudge those up slightly, and then you can move your tongue down as well. Now, we forgot to put this on frame 100. We're actually on frame 90. So let's just go to 100, highlight those keyframes, and put them at 100. It's a simple fix, and sometimes that happens. So now you can see we have the mouth opening. Pretty cool. If we go back out here to the main line, by double-clicking on it, going to our bone layer, and moving the mouth bone with the Manipulate Bones tool, we can see how this looks. So again, these smart dials are really powerful. And this is just the tip of the iceberg with what you can do with them. For this animation, our character will have a prop or a metal ball that he will be interacting with. We'll also need a background. So first, let's come over here to the Layers panel, and we're going to make a new vector layer outside of the bone layer. And we can name this ball. So once you have that, we can come over here to the Draw Shape tool, select the oval, and we will create a gradient for this. So we can choose gradient, and We'll leave it how it is right now and click OK because we can adjust it once we apply the shape and get rid of any other secondary effect if there is one. So once you have that with the Draw Shape tool, we're just going to hold in Shift and draw out a circle. Once you release, you'll see the gradient, just like that. So we want this to look like a metal ball, like it's going to be a heavy metal ball. So what we'll need to do first is line it up with his feet, so that it looks like it's on the ground. But also we'll need to correct the colors. So we'll use the Select Shape tool, we will remove the stroke, and we will choose the gradient settings. And first we'll choose radial, and then we can come in here and start adjusting the colors. Now, if you click anywhere outside of the other two swatches, you can create other colors for this. So let's do that and hit OK. And now with the Select Shape tool, move the gradient up like so. That way we can get an idea of what it will look like. And then go back into the gradient settings here, and then we can make our color corrections. So we'll start with the black swatch, and we can make more of a darker gray color. Click OK. For the second swatch here, we can lighten that one up. And we can see these effects happening in real time with the ball itself. So be sure to take advantage of that as you are making these adjustments. We can do the same here for the second swatch here and come back here. And basically, from here, you're just going to have to play with the colors until you get something that you like. You can see we're going kind of back and forth here. We'll even make this one a little bit lighter, like so. Click OK, and then we're good. Now from here, you can pinch this or move it around to set the gradient, so we can go about like that. So we're good now, I think, with that metal ball. Next, we're going to need a background, just something to add, some color for the character to be set on. So we'll create a vector layer, name it BG, put it beneath all the other layers, take the Draw Shape tool, select the rectangle, come over here to the Style palette, we'll use Gradient again. This time, we'll choose Linear, and we can simply click on these additional swatches that we made and hit the Delete key. That will remove them. So since he has a green color to him, our character, let's use a background that will complement this in some way. Something in the red category. Let's try orange. So we'll do an orange color like this, make it yellow, and we'll come in here and then we'll make this one more orange like that. And then we can click OK, OK, and then we can draw this out just like that. You won't see the gradient until you release. You can now see it, and you're good to go. If you want to preview what this looks like at any time, this current frame, you can do this by going up to File and Preview. You can also use Control-R if you're on a PC or Command-R if you're on a Mac. So far, he's looking good. Now it's time to animate this character out. So first, what we can do here, as you can see, he's cut off from the workspace. He's outside of the border. So we can click that monster bone layer, come in here, and just shrink him a little bit with the Transform Layer tool. And then bring him up a little bit, just so he's in frame. And we can do the same with the ball. Bring the ball up. Also shrink it, because, it's a little bit bigger now since we shrunk the monster character. So we can bring that down just a little bit, and of course place it back down towards his feet. So we have that going on, and now we can come down here to the timeline, and let's go to about frame 24, grab the monster layer, and what we're going to do here is create some keyframes for the bones just so we have a second of rest here. Now you could click on all the bones to set their keyframes, but in cases like this, it's easier just to use Control F or Command F. If you use that shortcut, it will set a keyframe for every single bone. That way now everything is anchored in and you won't have to worry about any floating bones later on. Although as we continue on with this, you'll see we have a couple cases where that happens and we have to correct it as we go. So let's page forward now to about frame 31. And we're going to have him lean back here, kind of in anticipation of the lift. So we will use the Manipulate Bones tool and just move the character back slightly like that. So you kind of have this motion going on here, like that. And you'll notice the hair is doing some kind of wacky stuff. Don't worry about that. That's not what it's going to look like in the final render. So now that we have that, we can move forward with the next animation. So basically, what's going to happen here, let's go to about frame 40, and let's see here, kind of move down like this. We will have him bend forward. We can do that with the head bone as well. We can move the arms into position for the ball here so that they grab the ball. And the ball, you'll see here, is in front of this arm. Don't worry, we will be correcting that here in a few steps from now. So what we'll also need to do is have him bend, because he needs to bend over in order to grab it. So we will enable onion skins on your timeline. And onion skins basically allow us to see frames that are before and after the current frame. In this case, we will click on frame 31 to see the onion skin for that frame. Now we are on frame 40. We just see a simple outline, and that's all we need because we just want to reference where the feet are. So if we take now the Transform Bone tool and we click on that main bone that we made, and we're going to translate the character downward. Okay? Now, what happened here was when we were doing this, you can see that he floats because we don't have a keyframe for that translate bone already established. Let's turn off the background here just so we can see this a little bit easier. So what we'll have to do is just go back to where this animation starts on frame 31 and hit reset with that bone selected. That will now bring us back to where we need to be. Just reset the position. As I said, we'll have that issue as it occurs throughout here. So we'll try our best though to keep those keyframes anchored. So now all we have to do is come in here on that frame and using the onion skin, just bend the legs and position the feet as close as possible to the original position. That way it will look like he's staying in place but bending downward as he goes for the ball. And just get this as best as you can. Now we page back. We can see that there is a slight little dip there where it kind of goes down and then back up. No problem. We just got to go to that frame where it does it, and we can go in and correct. So again, with your Manipulate Bones tool, just kind of bring the feet up so that everything is grounded. Just like that. And that's looking pretty good. We could, of course, spend a little bit more time on that if we wanted to, but for the most part, it's looking good. So now, coming in here, we can see that the arm actually isn't grabbing the ball. So what we can do here, take the Transform Bone tool, click and move that bone down to when he is, bending over. Now, we didn't anchor this again. You can see it kind of floats, as we are doing this animation. So when he starts to bend at frame 31, once again, click that bone, go to length and hit reset. So now you can see it's reset, it's in its original position, and it moves when he bends. So we can make a couple of additional corrections here to the movement if need be, just to kind of get things looking a little bit better, just like that. And now we can resume here. But first, make sure you save often. That's a good reminder right here. Save your project often, because if something were to happen, you don't want to lose your work. Trust me, we've all been there 100 times and it's not fun. So now, let's advance forward to about, I would say, frame 43, and just hit Control F. This will be a small rest for him. And Control F, of course, will create keyframes for all of the channels you have going on right now, your bone channels. Now we can advance forward to about frame 56, and we can now have him try to lift this thing up. So we'll have him bend up a little bit, just like this. So he's like, huh, trying to lift it. He's not going to be successful right away. So we can then create that movement for that. Now you may want to, at that point, Control F just to anchor any bones in at that point, and then go to 64, and then you can move back down like this. Now, just move your head down. So he was going up and down like that. So he was unsuccessful at first. And you can Control F again if you want. You probably don't have to, but you know, sometimes it's a good precaution. And we'll have him lift again back up. So he goes down and up. He's trying, but that ball is just, it's a pain, you know? So we have him try to lift up again, like this. Kind of adjust it like that, so it's up like that. And then, well, let's see here. Let's page forward to about frame 80. Now let's do 80. And then he'll go down one more time. So again, the ball is really heavy, so he's having some issue. So that's what we have going on right now. And again, make sure you Control F just to anchor all these in if you haven't done so already. It's always good to do that so we don't have that floating bone issue going on like we did before. So now we can page forward to about frame 92, and we will then take this bone and move it up like so. We can move the head back, and we can move the arms up, because now he is successful. He is getting that ball up in the air. So we can move the arm about like so and kind of bend it like that. So it's kind of like this now. So that's looking pretty good. Just kind of go up like that. We should have the leg shift though, because he is shifting his weight. So we can double click on that frame, on frame, I believe it was 80, to create that onion skin. Then we have a reference. Then on frame 92, we simply just move the leg back. Now using that onion skin, we can line up the leg as best as we can to make sure that it's still on the ground or wherever the ground is. And we can just use that onion skin as the reference. So onion skins are really nice for this type of stuff. And now we have this type of effect when he moves up. So we have the character animating out nicely, as you can see here. However, we have yet to animate the ball out. And of course, that is an important step, since the whole purpose of him is to lift the ball up. Now, I think you'll find as we dive into this portion that this part is actually pretty easy compared to what we just did. So first, we need to figure out how we're going to move the ball. You can see here we have some motion. You know, he comes down and up and down, you know, and then he finally lifts it up. So when do we decide when to move the ball? Well, if we go to the monster bone layer, We can go to each keyframe where he is about to move. So the first one is 43. We can click to add an onion skin. Go to frame 56, click. And we'll do this for each time the character moves up and down until he finally moves up and then it finishes. So I'll go right about here and click. Now you can see we have all these outlines occurring with the onion skins. If that's distracting for you, you can always go to onion skins and choose outlines only to deselect that. And you can now see the shadows of the character. You can do whichever way you want to do it. But that won't be such an issue because we won't be looking at him. We're going to be looking at the markers we placed down just now. So let's go to the ball, go to onion skins, and choose selected layer only. That way we don't have to worry about those shadows. And now we can focus solely on those markers we placed down on the timeline. Each of these markers is where we're going to move the ball. So first, let's establish a keyframe on frame 43. We can either use transform points or transform layer. In this case, we'll use the transform layer tool and just click to establish that keyframe. Now we can move to 56 and we can try to match the movement. Just move up slightly and over. And we can kind of come back and forth here and maybe do it a little bit more like so. Now, that's looking pretty good. We can move over then to frame 64 and move it back down. Just, in accordance to his movement. And we can use that onion skin with the ball to, make it sure it's placed back down where the floor is. Then we can move the ball up again. Just like that. Maybe even a little bit higher. Okay. Then down again. Again, use those shadows to make sure it lines up with the floor. And finally, we have it go up. So we can just move the ball up like so. So come down like this. We have him struggling. And then he finally lifts it up. And we could do maybe a little bit of fine tuning with that final movement. Maybe in between somewhere here. Like right about here. We could create a slight arch. And I think that looks better. Just like that. So, okay, looking good. We can click off of these markers now, or click on them to turn them off. And now we just have the metal ball without any onion skins, and that's good. Now we can come in here and fine tune if we need to. Like we could come here. Let's say here, we could just move it up a little bit. Like he's kind of lifting it up more. Come down and then up. Maybe just up a little bit more here. Just a little bit more. And comes down. Then he lifts it up. Like that. So that's looking pretty good. We now have the ball animated out. So now, the problem we have is the ball is in front of the arm. And we mentioned this before. So we need to correct this, and we're going to do so by using layer invisibility. So first, what we need to do is we're going to have to duplicate this ball so that we can have it visible in some portions and then have its duplicate take over when we make the main ball invisible, basically is what's going to happen. So let's go back to frame 0 and then select the ball layer, hit duplicate, and then we can name that ball 2, that's fine. But now we're going to move ball 2 into the monster bone layer, right below the front arm. And then we can release. So now, what we have going on here is the second ball as you can see, is smaller than the first, and that's just because of what we have done with the bone layer itself. So we can come in here with the transform layer tool on frame 0 still and just try to resize this and get it as close as possible to the first ball. You can move it in and out to see, the size comparison here, and it's definitely a little bit bigger. So we can just continue to resize here until we get it as close as we can. And now it's a little bit smaller, so we can make it a little bit bigger. And this is something you will probably have to play around with for a little while just to get the right size. So now, once you have the size where you want it, and again, you can move it back and forth just to compare, what we can do is page forward, and you'll see now as we're doing this, it's doing some kind of funky stuff, and that's just because of what the bones are doing to it. So we can just highlight the keyframes here and delete, because again, with the bone layer and with the keyframes, it's not meshing well. So we will have to recreate the movements. First, let's click on the monster bone layer, and then we can Alt-click the body bone, and then click and drag all the way across the ball to create a new bone. Now, we can come over here to the ball 2 layer, click bind layer, click that bone. That ball is now bound to the bone. Now, it's all a matter of coming through here and matching the movements to the first ball. So I'll click on the monster bone layer, since that's where the bone is, and we're going to take the transform bone tool so that we can move it around. We can basically move this as if we were moving a layer. So we're going to come over here now, and we're going to advance forward on the timeline, and we're going to figure out now when we should start these movements, when it's necessary. Now, these first few steps are not really necessary because we'll be using the layer invisibility for that. On frame 43 is when we can move this ball into the position of the original ball layer. So get it as close as possible, advance forward to frame 56, and you're going to do the same thing now, like that. Go to about frame 64, that's where our next movement was. We can move it in like so. Now, frame 75, another movement. Frame 80, move it up like so. And then at 92, of course, we have it go above the head. So once you do this, and you get it positioned above his head, you may recall with the original ball layer, we actually created an arc movement between those last keyframes. So we're going to want to do the same thing now with this layer as well. So I'll click on ball 2 and make sure we're on that bone layer, transform bone tool, and then we can move the ball into position so that we can mimic that arc effect that we had for the original ball. And there we go. Things are looking pretty good. So now, what we'll have to do next will involve the layer invisibility. So we're going to have to turn basically the layers on and off depending on when we need them. So the one inside the bone layer will be invisible initially. Then once he grabs the ball is when we'll turn the outside bone off. So we'll start with ball 1 on the outside. We'll advance forward to frame 44, double click, deselect visible, and click OK. So now that's invisible after he grabs the ball. So now what we'll have to do is come over here to ball 2, double click, click visible, click OK. So now that bone layer will be indivisible until we say otherwise, until frame 44, when the first one goes invisible. So we'll bring that ball 2 back on frame 44 and click OK. So now, when we play this out, hit play, you can see it's invisible. Let's turn off preview here, or turn on preview, I should say. And then we can check this out, and there's a slight glitch with it, but we will correct that here momentarily. We're going to move on to some other things, and then near the end here we can polish things up. And that's kind of how it goes. You will do one thing and then you'll have to do another, and it's all about moving pieces around until you get them all to fit. So now we are going to use a new feature that is in Anime Studio Pro 10 called the Stagger effect. So this will work really well for a animation like this because he's struggling to lift a weight, and so this is really ideal. So what we'll want to do here is find basically where he starts to lift, which it starts right about here. We will select the torso bone, and then that red bone channel, the selected bone channel, we'll highlight that keyframe, and then we will right click on it and choose Stagger. So now if we scrub forward or play this out, you'll see what it does. Basically, it looks like he will be struggling. You know, he's like stuttering almost as he's trying to lift this really heavy weight. So he'll set it down, and let's apply it again when he lifts the second time. Again, with that bone selected, right click, choose Stagger. And then you can see he's having an issue again, and then we will put it in one more time here. So highlight that keyframe and Stagger. So now we can play this out to see kind of what it looks like. He's struggling and then he gets it up. Now, for those of you who are wondering why we use a bone now to control the movement of the ball, this is why, because we are applying the Stagger effect to that main bone. And so since we have that ball then connected to that bone, it also staggers with him. So that allows us to have a consistent struggling effect when we do this animation. So now we're just kind of moving the ball a little bit just to get that arc a little bit more solidified. But as you can see, this is a cool effect and it has its place. You can also use bounce and elastic. Those are also two new movements you can do with the timeline in Anime Studio 10. Now that we have our body animations down, we can create some facial animations to complement what's going on here. So first, let's focus in on these dials that we've made. Click on your eyes dial, go up to the top, click the drop-down menu, and choose a color. We'll pick green. Now, when you pick a color, you'll notice in your channels on your timeline that you now have a green bone channel. This basically indicates the keyframes for that dial. So we basically have a channel for our eyes, which makes things easier when animating. Let's do the same for the mouth. We'll choose orange. Now we have an orange channel. So we have keyframes now for both of these already set. We don't want that. We can just highlight all of those and delete them, because we'll be setting down our own keyframes here from here on out. And you'll notice that that doesn't affect the actual animation. We just deleted keyframes for the green and orange bones, which are only our dials. So now, let's advance forward to about frame 5 and take the transform bone tool here, and we'll set a keyframe by clicking once on the eyes dial. Now in frame 9, let's close the eyes completely. And then on frame 13, we can copy that green bone channel and paste it onto frame 13. So he'll blink. Just like that. Just a quick blink, which is what we need. So he's going to blink now, and we'll do more with the eyes, especially when he's struggling. We'll have him squint and such. So when he starts to struggle right about here, let's create a keyframe by clicking on frame 43, and at about, let's say, frame 48, we can close his eyes a bit like so. So he's squinting. So he starts to squint because it's a tough, task here. And so squinting like that. And let's see, at frame 56, we can create another keyframe. And then come over here to frame 64 and then open his eyes back up a bit when he rests. So he's resting, and then he's going to squint again at 69. And then, let's see here, at about 75, we will create a keyframe. And then when he rests, bring the eyelids back up. So now, he's going to really squint here when he's lifting it above his head. And then we'll create a keyframe for this final frame on 92 because we'll add some animation after this. Okay, so we kind of have this thing going on, squinting as he is lifting it up. So that works pretty good. So now we can do the same for the mouth and the eyebrows. So let's do the eyebrows first. We will click to create keyframes on 43 for those eyebrows with the transform bone tool, of course. Go to 48, and then he can frown a little bit here, or he can lower his eyebrows to make it look like he's really determined here to lift this ball up. So we have that going on. And you can see now we have the eyebrows raise because we anchored all the keyframes in before when we were doing the body animations. And so what we can do is highlight both of those bones and go into the red bone channel. That's your highlighted bones channel. And basically from this point onward, we can delete those keyframes because we'll be making our own. So with that channel selected, you can highlight those keyframes and you can delete them. Or another thing you could do is right-click on that keyframe, select keys to right, and delete. However you want to do it. So now we can control the eyebrows from here without worry of those keyframes. So let's go to 56, and we will set keyframes then for those bones. Go to about 64. And we're basically going to be matching the eyes here. Hit enter to deselect your bones if you're having that issue. And then you can just raise your eyebrows like so when he's resting. So it's like that. He rests. And then we're going to come down again. So at about 69, bring the eyebrows down. And then at 75, we will create keyframes for the eyebrows, and then 80, raise them back up. Now, go to about 86, and you're going to have a hard time with the ball here, so you can hide the ball while you lower the eyebrows. Just like that. And then we can create keyframes for the brows at the end. And then we can bring that ball back. And we can see how this looks so far. Really determined with the eyebrows and the eyelids as he raises the ball up. So that's giving the right effect. Now we can look towards the mouth, because that will be one of the last things we do here. So we can click on 43 on that dial to create a keyframe. And then when the struggle starts, we can bring the mouth down. So then when we get to 56, we can create a keyframe, move to about 64, open the mouth a bit, kind of like a sigh of relief when he's resting. Then we can bring the mouth down again, up, and then down. And then click to add your last keyframe. So if we play this out, this is what we got now. He's like struggling with his mouth, and the eyebrows and the eyelids are all working to convey the struggle. So that's working pretty good for this. So let's add some animation after the fact. So we can advance forward to about 96 here. And what we can do now is we can start with any of these. Let's start with the eyelids, and let's do a blink. So we'll close the eyes, go to about 101, and then open them all the way wide. And we can possibly pause on that blink a little bit. So with the green bone keyframe in the middle there, let's take a look here. What we can do to create that pause, well, let's first open the mouth all the way and see how that looks with that. So we'll just go like this. You can see he's opening his mouth, and that's looking pretty good. I think a pause in there would work, but let's finish this up first. We'll create keyframes on the eyebrows, and then we will raise the eyebrows at the end as well, just to kind of show that he's really relieved or happy with what he has done here. Like that. And let's see here. Yeah, we can add a slight pause with that blink now. So we'll just select that green bone keyframe right there, copy, advance one frame, and paste. That will then add a pause. So we have it going like that. And we can do one more thing here. We can move the pupils. So we'll keyframe at 92 with the transform bone tool. Just click like that, because remember, this bone controls the pupils. Then, let's see here, we can advance forward. We can put a keyframe there actually, and I guess probably there too, so that it moves after the eyelids open, so we can go like this then on frame 101. So now he struggles, and he is very happy with his accomplishment. So to make this piece even more exciting, we can add some camera movement to it. And that is pretty easy to do. So what you'll need to do here first is come over here, and we need to set where we want this to occur. So basically right before he opens his eyes and smiles at the camera, we can come over here to our tools and grab the track camera tool and click on the canvas just to create a keyframe, and the same now for the zoom camera. So once we do that on frame 92, we can then move forward to 101 when the smile ends, and we can zoom in now, and we can also track. And you can go as close as you would like. This just depends on how you want to approach it. So we can take a look, and this is what we have. So that's pretty good, and it's just another way for us to add to the animation. Now, as you're working on your animation, there may come a time where you want to preview the animation out and see how it looks in full motion, because sometimes in Anime Studio, it drops frames depending on how detailed your animations are. Well, there's a new feature in Anime Studio Pro 10 that allows us to preview an animation really quickly, and it saves on render time, and it basically gives you a rough idea of what this will look like in full motion. It doesn't drop any frames, which is great. It basically captures what you have on screen. So what we can do here is go on the timeline, and let's say we want to add an end marker to when this preview will stop. We can find a place, and what you can do is hold in the Control key, or Command if you're on Mac, and right-click, and you'll see now a red marker appears. So now it will go from 1 to 113. Now we can go to File and Preview Animation, or Control-Shift-R, and you'll see it will play out, and boom, you have now a video preview of what has occurred. Now with this video capture, it might not look entirely smooth, but that's kind of how video captures go with tutorials. You won't get the full effect. But as you can see, it's really quick, and you get to see everything that's going on your workspace in full motion, meaning no dropped frames. We can just Control right-click to get rid of that stop frame. And let's say you want to capture just a small segment of your animation. You can hold in Control and left-click anywhere you want this to start. Right here, that will indicate that it's green. You can then go to, let's say here, Control, right-click on the top here where your numbers are, and then that will place red. So go and stop, basically. And now, if we go back here and preview this again, you'll see now it's only going to go between those 2 points, which is great if you just want to do a small segment of your overall project. You don't have to do anything special other than that, which is great. Now, again, this will preview what you have going on your workspace. So we can increase the window here, zoom in, and we could even remove the bones here just temporarily, and then we could try this again. And you'll notice once we do this that the video plays what we see. It's larger because we're zoomed in. There's no bones because we are hiding those right now. And it works well, again, just for rough animations. And everything will go into your render cache in your Anime Studio content folder. So if you're looking to look at those, you can. Just know that your content is overridden each time you preview an animation. Now let's add some audio to this file. Adding audio can really enhance any project file in Anime Studio, and you'll find this as you continue to build more complex projects. So for this one, we're going to add 2 different sound effects, just 2 simple ones. So in order to import an audio file, you could go to File and Import, or you can make an audio layer like we did right here. And let's find one right here. This is called straining. It's basically the sound of someone like straining to lift a weight. And you can see now we have the sound file on the timeline. So the trick here now is to place the sound file so that it makes sense to what's going on screen. We wouldn't want him to make that sound right away. We want him to make it basically when he starts to lift the weight. So maybe even around here, kind of like probably around frame, let's see here, 35 to 40, around there. So we can take what's called the sequencer, and with the sequencer, we can move clips around, and this is ideal for audio. So we could click and drag the audio file to frame 36, or around there. So that's when the audio file will start. So you can adjust, and let's just rewind here. Go back to channels. You can see the file has changed position. And if we hit play, let's just move this down here and hit play. You can hear he's grunting as he lifts the weight, which works out pretty good. Let's add one more sound file, and you can add as many sound files as you want in Pro. I know debut is limited to 2, but we could add as many as we want, but we're just going to do 2 for our purposes here. This is an end sound for us. So looking at this sound would probably be most appropriate when we zoom in, or at least when we start to zoom in. So we can take the sequencer and move that all the way up here to when the zoom in occurs, like right about there. So we can come back here and rewind, hit play. Now finally, once your animation is complete, you will want to export it out to share it with the world. So we can enable our background here, because if it's hidden, it won't export out with the video. And once we are good, go to File and Export Animation. And here we can set then the parameters. You can choose which frames you want to export out. We end at 135, so we're good there. You could click Entire Animation if you want everything rendered out. You have some other render options as well as your format options. We will be using QuickTime for this. If you're on Windows, you'll need to be in 32-bit mode in order to access QuickTime. Once you've done this, you can find a place to save it, and from here, you can choose your compression settings. We will be using animation for our purposes here. It's a good blend of quality and file size, but you can try PNG or none if you're having other issues. And we'll do millions of color plus and best. So click OK, and you'll see now the animation render out. Now this can take anywhere from a few seconds to several hours. It really depends on the detail that is in your animation. So keep that in mind. For us, it's a really simple animation. It's short, and so this won't take long to render out. So once it's rendered out, once your meters fill, that's basically showing you the progress here, it will open up your preferred player and play the video out so you can preview it. So as you can see, we have it going on right here. And that's all there pretty much is to it. One thing about work like this is sometimes we make mistakes. And when Jim and I were recording this tutorial, a mistake was actually made when we were moving the foreground arm. Basically, there came a point where the monster bent down and we moved the arm so that it would reach the ball. The problem was we didn't move it back. And it's not a huge issue because you can always go back and make these corrections. It's just we weren't able to during the process of recording, so this is kind of a pickup video for us. But it's also a good time to touch on the fact that you can always go back and polish up your works. And the same applies for that little pop-in effect we have with the hand and the ball. You can always go back and touch up and go where we haven't in these 2 hours, because you'll have a lot more time to perfect your creations and basically make the cartoon that you want to make. You can see here all we had to do was select that bone and hit reset, and now it's back to its original position. Along with all of this though, with polishing and basically everything we've gone through, there's so much more we haven't touched on. There is automatic lip syncing you can do in Anime Studio. There's the switch layers, there's the text tool, there's the character wizard, there's the content library, there is the automatic YouTube uploader. There's so much content here, and really this video doesn't do it justice. So be sure to look at the other videos we have for Anime Studio. You'll find them on the Content Paradise YouTube channel, as well as the official Anime Studio website at anime.smithmicro.com, where you can also get more information on Anime Studio itself. So hopefully this video has helped you out. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you next time.